The library is open now. You better believe it. There goes my pop career. Hi everybody, and welcome back to another brand new episode of The Library is Open with me, your gracious hostess, Stu Crowther, aka Creeping My Asthma. When I'm in drag, go follow the vegan queens if you don't already. Link, as always, in the description. There's the PR package. I'm drinking a lovely cup of tea, as is my wont, from a very whimsical cup today. It's Chip from Beauty and the Beast. I'm not sponsored. For a very whimsical book, you know. What's really interesting, because I asked in the previous video what people's sort of reading habits were like at the moment, you know, what everyone was engaged in, what kind of things they were gravitating towards, and you know, they were very varied, which is probably to be expected. I was sort of thinking about my own, and you know, I've mentioned in previous videos how I'm going back to things that I loved in childhood. You know, I did the Babysitters Club video about nostalgia, and I sort of talked about listening to audiobooks of things that are quite soothing and so on and so forth, which I suppose is a fairly human response to you know, when you feel that events in the outside world are kind of beyond your control and so on and so forth, at least singularly. And what surprised me actually was that I haven't read as much fantasy, I suppose, as I might have expected to. Because, you know, I suppose you know, that's where your mind goes immediately, doesn't it? To sort of escapist fiction and so on and so forth. But that hasn't really been my experience, and I don't know if that's because I am consciously, or rather subconsciously, making that decision for things that I review for this channel, or review feels too strong, talk about, or whether that is just what I've gravitated towards. But anyway, I decided to take a little punt, as it were, and go for a fantasy book. There was, I cannot remember who recommended this on booktube. There was a booktuber, and if I find out, I will, or if I remember, I will link them down below. I want to give credit where it's due. But I was watching a whole video of new books that they'd received, and they recommended this one, which is The 10,000 Doors of January. That beautiful illustration there, which continues on the inside flap. It's gorgeous, sort of Victoriana, kind of William Morris style thing with a twist. And I thought, you know what, that sounds good. And I didn't really know anything about it, and I just bought it sight unseen, which is probably not a great thing generally, but spoiler, it worked out quite well this time. So yeah, this is not what I was expecting, and massively surpassed my expectations. So this is a novel by Alix E. Harrow. It's her debut novel. I really love her bio, actually. I'd just like to read you that because it gave me a little grin. Alix E. Harrow is an ex-historian with lots of opinions and excessive library fines. Can you be an ex-historian? I suppose professionally you could be. Anyway, I suppose you'll always sort of subconsciously be a historian, though, as I suppose we're all historians, really. I don't mean professionally, but we sort of store ideas. Anyway, that's irrelevant. So that gave me a lot of fun, the bio. I love a self-aware bio. My bios are usually quite self-aware, I hope. Anyway, little summary of what this one's about. It's hard to do justice to this because it's quite epic in scale, but I shall do my very best. So the plot primarily concerns a our lead character, January, who is, her father is, so she's mixed race, her father's black, and he travels a lot acquiring things for her sort of guardian, Mr. Locke, who very graciously puts her up. This takes place in the 1800s in America. Well, a bit. She has no relationship with her mother, who's not on the scene at all, and she sort of lives as his ward, Mr. Locke's ward, but with the sort of painful awareness that they're quite different in many ways, but she is kind of protected by his He's a cushion of money, wealth, prestige, so on and so forth. He's sort of collector of antiques and, you know, objets d'art and weird things. Generally speaking, that's a technical term. Anyway, one day when she's 7, she discovers a door, which is how the book opens, just standing in the middle of the outside world, that leads into another world. She doesn't get the chance to follow up on this, and when she tells her guardian, you know, she's sort of not believed, so on and so forth, and then sort of thinks nothing of it. And then later, when she's 17, she discovers a book, which is called The 10,000 Doors, and it's a sort of monograph or manuscript written by a guy called Alix E, who is from another world. And this manuscript is about the fact that doors to other worlds exist all over the world and run kind of parallel to the world that we recognise and know. And it goes into great detail about a woman called Adelaide Larson, who discovers a door, and when she discovers this door, she meets Julian, and they share a kiss, you know, and they plan to meet again. And then when she goes back to the door the following day, it has vanished, and they have no way of connecting. So she vows to rediscover a way to find him again, and in the process discovers that there are multiple doors. 10,000 here is not a specific figure. It means it's roughly translated from another worldly language to mean multiple or infinity of numbers. Anyway, as time passes in the quote-unquote real world, January comes of age and discovers that there is a dark side to her relationship with Mr. Locke, who invites her to join his society, who it turns out all have an awareness of this idea of doors around of the world and are actively trying to keep them closed because they fear that, you know, allowing access to other worlds where other things are possible threatens the stability of our world. So Adelaide, I keep saying Adelaide now. I think it's because of Guys and Dolls, Miss Adelaide. Love that character. So January is, because she knows too much, because she's read this manuscript and discovered that she has the power to open some of these doors that have been closed. And it's an ability that is practiced by people in another world who are known as word workers, who can literally conjure things into being. And she discovers that she has quite a potent ability to do this by writing on her skin, at one point spilling blood, and also, willing things to be, you know, so she's quite powerful in that respect. And yes, so she ends up being locked up in an asylum. But through her friend Samuel, who is a sort of local boy, she manages to escape and goes on the run, as it were, to rediscover these doors and find out the truth of you know what's going on in the background, and also to search for her father, who she's been told is dead, but she doesn't believe it. So I'm not going to say any further on that, on the particular plot, because I think all that still remains as set up, as it were, and I don't want to sort of spoil the twists and turns of where the story goes. One thing I would like to really share is in the monograph, this is a beautiful moment that exists. And I'm well aware that this is written with a 2019 sensibility, 2020-2019 sensibility, but it is about the 1800s, and I just love the fact that even retroactively this was in the text. They're talking about Adelaide as a fallen woman, and then one of the footnotes to the monograph says, There is, of course, no such thing as a fallen woman unless we are speaking of a woman who recently tripped on the stairs. One of the most difficult elements of this world, meaning our world, is the way social rules are simultaneously rigid and arbitrary. It's impermissible to engage in physical love before binding legal marriage unless one is a young man of means. Men must be bold and assertive, but only if they are light-skinned. Any persons may fall in love regardless of station, but only if one is a woman and the other is a man. I urge you not to navigate your own life by such faulty borders, my dear. There are, after all, other worlds. Which I thought was a beautiful thing just to put in there, and a real sort of, you know, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, and sort of gift from the author via the text to the reader. You know, particularly because I don't think this is technically classed as young adult fiction, but given the you know, the fantastical nature of it, it does have a crossover with a lot of, you know, thematic similarities with things that come under YA. So that's lovely. What I also love is the way that it deals with the ideas around race, which is only an issue in our world. Like, January stands out because she's mixed race, but wealth sort of ish protects her until she no longer has the wealth protecting her, and then it's a very different story. But in other worlds that exist that we come to know of through the doorways, you know, people with light skin, such as Adelaide character, are seen as, they're not persecuted, but they are seen as other because everybody in this other world is dark skinned. And I thought that was a really sort of quite nice subtle way to really flip the script on that and underline how ridiculous, you know, racial discrimination is, but without hammering that point so acutely that we feel that we're being told. It's a really good way to illustrate that, to point out the lunacy of it all. There's some delightful characters in this. January is a wonderful narrator, simultaneously sort of, you know, tenacious, but with the right amount of humility, and also very sort of self-knowing and self-aware. She's a very strong character. There's a delightful dog character called Bad, which is lovely. There's some seriously creepy characters from the society, some of which is never explained. One of them's almost vampiric, and that's not really expanded on in terms of is he actually a vampire and so on and so forth, but he's very much in pursuit of January because of the knowledge that she has. And, you know, I just love this sort of idea that these sort of parallel dimensions exist alongside our own, and that they've been consciously closed by people in order to capitalise on, you know, preserving their own interests, which, you know, we might read as an allegory for how people, you know, close the metaphorical doors of class, of money or wealth, of power and prestige, you know, because, you know, when you open a door, you know, you have to share what's in the other room, don't you? And if it's your room, or you think it's your room, maybe you just want to keep that to yourself. So I think that's very true of, you know, politics and also status in our world. So I really like that idea. I also really like the idea of sort of like alternate realities existing alongside our own, just because I think it sort of buys into that whole idea of, you know, perception, and what we have decided is reality, what we've decided is the world, because it makes sense to us in where we live, but actually there are like thousands, hundreds, millions of potential other avenues. I suppose, remember that film Sliding Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow, where she is getting the train, and in one reality she gets the train, and in one reality she misses it, and her life takes sort of two different paths. I sort of like to conjecture about that, you know, sort of historical fulcrums. Oh, someone passed science, barely. You know, what are, you know, we talk a lot about big events, don't we, in sci-fi and fantasy, e.g. what if Germany had won the war, but even what if, alternate realities could spin off out of things as banal as, you know, one day you open a window, one day you don't. Wouldn't they equally have an adverse number of potentialities? And what if they all did exist at once, but we're only experiencing one of them? So it's fascinating. It's a really easy read as well. Well, it's a fair chunkster. It's about, how many is it? It's 372 pages, but it's really sort of fast-paced and very, very readable. What I also really liked was the time setting, because, as you know, I love Victoriana and that sort of age of exploration and so on and so forth, but I'm more versed in it as Victorian England, whereas it's actually really nice to, and it sounds so obvious, but I don't know why I haven't done before, but to think about those time periods all throughout the world. And I don't mean that to sound like I'm sort of British centric, it's just, you know, when someone says Victoriana, my go-to is Victorian London, probably because that's where a lot of books from the time were written about. But this is sort of America and other parts of the globe at that time, and I don't always think I apply that same logic. I wonder what, you know, Victorian Africa looked like. I wonder what Victorian, you know, Vietnam looked like. All those sort of things. So it's just fascinating to think about, and something I'd be really, really interested in. I haven't read a lot of Victorian literature set in America, for instance. I've read a bit, but yeah, something about how the defining characteristics of that period are often quite geographical. You know, I suppose in the same way that you look at like the Roaring Twenties, I always think of them in terms of America. Or, you know, the 60s again, I think of again in terms of the UK. Well, London, let's face it. And, you know, I'd like to widen my ideas and understanding about that to be more sort of globally inclusive. So this is cracking, this is lovely. It's like a love letter to storytelling and words and, you know, the act of sharing narrative. There's one little beautiful thing that's done throughout is how January sort of comments on letters as actual, almost like pictograms of things. She talks about the letters are shaped like. I'll give you an instance. When I was 7, I found a door. There, look how tall and proud the word stands on the page. The belly of that D like a black archway leading into white nothing. When you see that word, I imagine a little prickle of familiarity makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. You know, so there's something about that, isn't it, that's really sort of smart about when you think about what letters look like in the English language, I should say that. And she sort of does that throughout. It's like a motif, but it's not annoyingly done, but it's when it's pertinent to the story as well, which feels very sort of smart. I'm looking if there's any more examples. I probably won't be able to find them now. Predictably, no, I can't, but like, look out for that, because they're the sort of, if you think of letters and then words as the sort of building blocks of stories, what, you know, inner stories might they have in and of themselves that are, you know, jumping off points for us to think about and conjure even more worlds. And that's what this is all about. So I really, really recommend this. It's a beautiful read if you're into that kind of thing that I've been talking about, you know, sort of parallel universe. It's not too sci-fi heavy, it's more fantastical, which I struggle with heavy sci-fi, I'm not going to lie. It's not really my thing, but fantasy is good, and this is good, but rooted enough in reality as well, so you feel like you're getting the payoff if your go-to is, you know, sort of contemporary fiction and so on and so forth. So thank you for joining me for that little magical mystery tour of the 10,000 Doors of January. Keep it coming, what you're reading at the moment, what you're interested in, where your head is. Watching a couple of videos on YouTube about booktube, I should say, people who are not able to get into reading at all at the moment, or are reading voraciously, or are reading but can't, you know, finish books, things like that. it is a weird time, so, you know, and there's no shame. Reading is supposed to be a pleasure. I'm just interested in where people are with that. I'm like a demon at the moment, but then I do have this channel as well, so I guess that always helps. But thank you for joining me so much. Do give me a like if you liked this video. Do give me a subscribe if you haven't already. I'm proper dead nice. And you know, as an entertainer and teacher, my future is precarious at the moment, so I could do with everything I can, any bit of support I can get, even if it's just a like or a sub. Anyway, much love. Put your library cards away somewhere nice and safe now. Take care of yourselves. Wear a mask when you go out, please. Practice social distancing. Stay at home and read a book. Sniff a book. You know, cavort with a book, if you will. And I will see you in the very next episode. The library is now closed now. I don't think I can pull that off, but God knows I'm going to keep trying. Bye, everyone. Mwah.